Hi, my name is Simon Hedley, known to my clients and partners as a strategic alchemist and an ultimate connector. I'm a chartered accountant who brings together and bridges the worlds of business philosophy, finance, marketing, optimization, ontology, and so much more. Always focused on one thing, the simple idea that can make the difference to people and projects, so we can tip the scales in their favor and get them complete. Pause, Stop, Reset is all about the three little words that can make the difference. They have for me and my clients, and I hope they will for you too. During the show, you'll get to learn about my guests' real-life experiences and the insights and lessons they've learned as they've navigated the resets in their personal and business lives, which you'll be able to leverage yourself. So let's start the show. Hello, I'm Simon Hedley, and welcome to this episode of Pause, Stop, Reset. Today I'm joined by my friend, the one and only Sebastian Bates. He's had a super interesting life, lots of resets and unique experiences, which I'm sure we'll touch on today. If you haven't come across him before, I think you're in for a real treat. He's a successful entrepreneur, author, and speaker. Like me, he's passionate about martial arts and anti-bullying, and he founded the Warrior Academy, amongst other initiatives. He had his own major challenges, getting a near-fatal base jumping accident, and I could keep going on for hours. But I think it's time to introduce the man himself. Without further ado, Seb, welcome to Pause, Stop, Reset.
Thank you so much for having me. Excited to be on, Simon.
It's been a long time since you and I caught up in the world before lockdown, and I have to admit, most of us took it quietly. I've just watched you take off and go through so much that I can't really get into today. It's like, what's he been having? I want some of that. But let's start with the real beginning. If people listening in may not know you yet, hard to believe, but if they haven't kept up with you and your resets, who are you and what are you focused on today?
Yeah, so my name is Sebastian Bates, and I'm the founder of the Warrior Academy. So the Warrior Academy is a martial arts organization, but it specializes in character development. If we were to break that down, we would break that down to the 3 C's: confidence, conduct, concentration. Over the last 13, 14 years since I've been running the Warrior Academy, we've worked with over 30,000 children around the world.
Wow.
Skipping forward to today, it's now an award-winning organization that works with 4,000 kids every single week. 50% of our members are paying members, and the other 50% are on scholarships, free tuition in developing countries. So we're currently based in 6 countries. We've got plans to be in every single continent in the next 18 months. And we've got 60 staff around the world. We've got books written about our methodologies, which have become bestsellers, and so on. So essentially, my passion is around character development and anti-bullying.
Love it. And I just that number, 40,000 students, is a huge impact, right?
Yeah, 30,000 students. Yeah, it's amazing how many insights you gather from that, especially if you look at the data. So we really study data. We're very data driven. So we kind of think like a big business in that regard, right? Because we measure everything when it comes to just the small changes in character, which no one really does when it comes to character development, right? No one measures it. You know, what does it actually take to improve a child's confidence from 26% to 43%, or improve their conduct from 15% to 20%, and so on? And so that's kind of been our approach. So yeah, when you look at the numbers, it's kind of one thing, but then you look at the personal stories around it, and then it becomes such a powerful, emotive subject. So yeah, super passionate about it.
And I think you're younger than me by a little bit, or quite a lot, but martial was always the character stuff. And I've watched it shift to be more of, the fighty UFC stuff. Not that isn't. It's a very different thing than that the Budo, the stuff behind it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, for me, martial arts at its core is the development of a moral compass in an individual. I think when you look at why martial arts evolved, it was very much in a kind of disciple kind of, method, right? Where you would look up the teacher and then you would learn, then you would pass it on to the next person. And now it's very commercialized. And the role models we have within martial arts are people like Conor McGregor, who's getting arrested on TV, or, this guy or that guy, whatever it is, swearing on TV and basically acting immorally to try and further their career or get money. And so we're really focused on the kind of polar opposite of the benefits of martial arts, using martial arts as a vehicle to develop character, essentially.
This is not the normal questions, but hey, it's 2 fellow brothers in the martial arts world. The thing I always loved was sort of the Japanese, 10th Dan master. It's like, no, if you're in a fight, go back to white belt. If you actually have to go fight violent, no, back to beginning school for you, because the goal is in a fight. Another thing is that martial art, which was a thing versus a sport, right? Tai Chi is my thing, 20 odd years of it. You're not designed for a 5-hour fight. It's designed to be a 3-second thing, get yourself out and be safe. It wasn't it's different worlds.
Yeah, definitely.
for another time, we'll explore that more. Let's start sort of the interesting bit of the show, right? So if you look back on your life till now, what are the biggest shifts and resets you've been through?
Biggest shifts or resets, I would say, as a young man, learning to live unselfishly through almost losing my life, and learning that as I've grown older, my responsibility lies in serving other people outside of myself. Ultimately, I've had to kind of be very broad stroked about it.
And it's funny. Again, I was saying we just started today, right? So I've learned more prepping for this than previously. I fell 80 onto my back on an army training thing, age about 17. Not supposed to. And it is that sort of not a weird wake up call, because you either go the extreme of, let's say, partying and drugs and crazy, or you actually, there must be a bigger reason. And you've also got a young family, right? That's part of the big driver I know about you. The family aspect's really important. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because in a lot of ways, my kids kind of saved my life. And I think, I was going down a path in my 20s where I was an extreme sports athlete, done over 500 wingsuit base jumps and skydives around the world, climbed some of the most incredible mountains one way up and jumped off with a parachute the other side. And so within that environment, I was part of a team of 15 or so extreme sports athletes who were really pushing human flight. And, it got to the level where we were taking so many risks that the death rate was so high.
Yeah.
And, I think when I basically had a base jumping accident where I dropped 50 foot on one of my jumps in Switzerland, and I broke everything from the waist down, both legs, both feet, both ankles. Quite a severe accident. And it took me 2 years to learn to walk again after that. All the doctors said I couldn't, but I did. And so, 2 years later, as soon as I felt like I was now able to kind of use my body again, I started base jumping again. And I remember, strapping my legs up because I couldn't really use one of them, climbing for 3 hours up a mountain to do a base jump, it being too windy to actually jump, coming back down. And a few months later, my daughter being born. And I think, in that moment, I realized that ultimately, if I carry on the way I'm going, she won't have a dad. And, I would be selfishly pursuing an extreme sport. But also you're in this position where it's like, what else do you live for? You need something so powerful in your life that basically replaces something that extreme sports gives you. And for me, that was having kids.
Yeah.
For a lot of, when I look at extreme sports athletes, they almost, in order to get out, right, to survive, getting into it, incredible experience. The problem is on the other side. How do you get out of it? And so you've got to get out with something that really grabs you in your soul and grabs your attention and forces you to focus on something else. And for me, that was my kids. It was about, empowering my kids, which is kind of a strange way of looking at it, because the way I looked at it, especially at that time, was I really wanted to make sure my kids could live without me, because I'd just been so close to death for so many years. And my whole mindset was, I've now got these living things that depend on me. Shit, what am I supposed to do if I'm not around? Yeah. So my whole kind of focus and mentality was like, I need to make sure these kids are okay without me. And so I realized that I was obsessed with empowerment. And, empowerment was all about character development. And I realized that I wanted to do that for my own kids and to give them the tools necessary to face life's obstacles and overcome huge challenges in their life. But I also wanted to do it for other kids. I wanted to help thousands of kids around the world. And that ultimately was the turning point. I would say the reset, the pause reset moment for me, where I said, right, now we're going to be pushing the Warrior Academy. And I think, the Warrior Academy had been running for about 7 years up until that point. But it was then after that point, we accelerated. We grew by something like 4 or 5 times within 2 years. It was incredible, the change just from that one pause reset.
Yeah. And just curious, like I'm here 45 in the UK. There were no sort of flying seats when I was a kid, right? How old are you today?
33 now. So when I was doing all the jumping, I was sort of 22, 24.
So you sort of hit that wave. We had sort of windsurfing. Kitesurfing was dabbling now. Kitesurfing established, that's established. Ironically, one of my friends flew into a mountain a few years ago doing this, and it was like, didn't even know we did it, right? I'm just curious, what got you starting down that route, right? Sort of professional fighting, extreme sports, and you've gone obviously Dubai now. So what had you go from, where did you grow up? Sort of in the UK somewhere, I'm guessing.
Yeah, so I grew up in the UK. military family. Dad was a para.
Yeah.
He was also in the Marines. Adventure and kind of challenging ourselves was very normal as a young person. I'd watch my dad jump out of planes at the weekend and do assault courses, climbing tanks all the time, all this sort of stuff. So that was basically my childhood. Adding to that the martial arts, and we had a very sporty family. Sister was in the GB team for gymnastics. Older sister was a gymnastics coach.
Wow.
Little brother was into football, and I was competing nationally in martial arts all around the UK. So we were always very, very sporty, always about challenging ourselves. It was very rare in the Bates family for most family meals not to end in some sort of physical contest, whether it was, arm wrestling or a handstand competition or just something ridiculous. And it was so funny because that's basically how we kind of grew up, you know, and it really kind of gave us all this competitive, I would say competitive edge, but also just like, feeling like you're in competition was just normal for us, I think.
And you never thought, I'm going to go in, join the regiment, join the SAS and take sort of the Bear Grylls route?
Yeah. So when I was 16, I joined the Royal Marines Reserve. And so, while I was studying A-levels, I just started studying A-levels. At the same time, every Wednesday, Saturday and Sunday, I was out, in Lympstone or in Bristol training with the Royal Marines. So at the age of 16 to 18, all of my friends were in their 30s. And so I grew up very, very quickly. You can imagine what a bunch of, Royal Marine soldiers are like.
Yeah.
That was my environment throughout my A-levels for 2 years. And so I had all the pressure of the normal A-level student. But then every day I'd come to school with webbing and go for a run for 6 miles, during my lunch break. Or if it was my freeze, I'd be polishing my boots because the next day I've got to go out and, I'd come some days, some weekends, Sunday night, for instance, I wouldn't sleep because I wouldn't have a chance to sleep because we'd be out camping the whole time. I'd come back Monday and I had an arrangement with the IT teacher. He was my first teacher on a Monday morning. He would let me sleep through the class.
Wow.
He knew what I'd be up to, and it was funny because I'd come in with camo cream on still. And these other kids who were like 16, 17, I was just living a very different life. And so I never really felt a part of school when I was 16, 17. I kind of felt like an adult. Even though I was just a young boy, really. But the things I was doing, and then there was the whole social side to the Royal Marines, right? So, I was taken to nightclubs when I was 16 all around the UK, and my whole upbringing was like having 20 to 30 big brothers, right? Whereas all the conversations going on in school were very kind of childish compared to what I was experienced in my other life. And so it was this really strange kind of balance between the two, but I think it ultimately accelerated my development and how quickly I grew up and how quickly I was able to take on responsibility, very much at a young age.
No, I love it. And there's always that sort of army aspect to it a bit more, obviously. You'll get to know Seb. He's definitely got that. He could be Commander Bond on a good day. Of these three aspects of, pausing, stopping, and resetting, right? I think there's different skills. Pausing is take and keep going. Stopping is, no, we're not doing any more of that. And a reset is brand new game. Which do you think has been the hardest for you, and why do you think that was?
I feel like stopping, I'm forced to stop, right? Yeah. Like stopping is like, right, you've broken all your bones. You're not jumping for a year. Yeah. We've thrown the towel in. Do you know what I mean? Or it's like there's a pandemic, so you're not doing that anymore, right? You're no longer running your business like you were doing. Stop. Yeah. And reset for me is always exciting because reset is like this growth energy, right? It's like you've gone through the stop and now you're resetting and you're about to start this new exciting thing. I'm all about that. That's never been an issue for me. I think the hardest thing for me is to pause. And so what I've realized is where most people need accountability to stay motivated, I need the opposite. So if you met my personal trainer who I work with almost 2 years now, we've got a really funny dynamic. Because, most people have a personal trainer to motivate them. I've got a personal trainer to slow me down.
Yeah. And if you saw your photos post lockdown, you might as well be professional. Again, it's inspiring and in daunting way. You and Akash, you're like you're it's crazy. You're doing you're not doing it from that insane place. You're actually doing it from, you enjoy it, you're doing it and being really healthy. I think in many ways, you feel like you're in a better health now than you were in your fitness fighting days. Does that make sense?
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, with the personal trainer, it's like his approach is very much to I'm very patient with other people, but I'm not that patient with myself, right? And so his approach is trying to encourage me to be kinder to myself, and rather, to live to fight another day a lot of the time, and rather than going all out where my body is saying no, which is my mentality. It's like, irrespective of how my body feels, if I've decided to do it, then I'm doing it. And that's the mindset that's really served me throughout my life. But when it comes to the longevity of what you want to achieve, sometimes having those little pauses and having accountability for the pauses is really, really useful. But yes, it's incredible. I mean, it's when I look at why I do what I do, it's amazing how much suffering I voluntarily bring into my life. It's like
I'm not at myself, they're not at you, just the record. It's like, yep, that's the one. It's like, why am I doing this? Yep.
And I just love it. I just love it. I'm a lot of people chase happiness, right? And they're like, I want to be happy, so I'm going to choose and do things that make me happy. That's what I'm about. I'm just not about that. Like, if I look at the way in which I spend my time, my resources, my money, it's outside of doing things for other people, because I think as you grow up, you gain a lot of happiness through service and serving other people, your family, your community, whatever it is. Outside of that, the things I do for myself ultimately just bring me more suffering. And, I don't need to train 4 hours a day, but I do it because I like what it does to me. I like how much discipline it brings into my life. And it makes me feel like if I'm able to put myself through things I don't necessarily want to do, then when bigger challenges come around, I'm just not fazed by it. Yeah. It's a sense of control in your life. And so, a typical day for me is every morning a 2-hour walk. Half of that walk is weighted with a weighted vest. Then there's like an hour of cardio and an hour of weights. And that's just like a normal day. For a normal human being, that sounds like hell on earth. And I don't blame most people for feeling that way, but I've gained so many benefits from doing that. I do a lot of my work while I'm out and about anyway. And so I've got this, I've certainly got a passion for basically finding and creating more discipline in my life.
No, I love it. And I get that. And part of what I think you'll find as you get older, it's, in my 30s, I could do 4 days with no sleep. You've had the army training. You just keep going. Now, it's not ideal for the body. It's sort of like... Yeah. Is the game to be 200 years old? I'm sure you've seen that in your sort of future. The sort of entrepreneurs looking for...
I know. I see all this stuff, right? And then I'm like, well, do you know what? Years aren't created equally. Yeah. What's the point in living to 100 or 120 or 150 if you're in pain every day and you're hating your life, or you're not around your friends and family, if you're lonely or you're stuck in an old people's home, whatever it is. Yeah. On the flip side of that, I totally get it. I've been involved in a community at which I've had 15 friends die in their 20s, right? By the time I was 25, 15 of my close mates were dead in their 20s because they pursued a life where they tried to cram so much into such a short amount of time. Yeah. Because they wanted to have the extreme pleasure that life could give them. And ultimately, life is not about that. It's got this incredible way of having yin yang and balance, and it sort of balances itself out. And so something as dark as base jumping, and, while it's got all that beauty, it's also got all of that, death and despair. And that's the reality, right? And I think it's interesting. You think you can just fill your life with the good stuff, but that's not how life works. So if you think living to 150 or 200 is just going to be full of the good stuff, then the reality is you kind of just got more chance of experiencing either side of that. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. Yeah. So one of the most important questions, I think, is, taking your life up to now, your experiences, if you could sort of send back that sort of one little nugget of wisdom back to your younger self, what would that be? What do you wish, the 10-year-old, 15-year-old Seb knew?
Really tricky, because I think I grew up in a different time. I think I was on the cusp of growing up where it was, young men had a social contract which was quite clear. Yeah. I think it's a really confusing time for young men now. And I work with a lot of parents, a lot of young men, and that's kind of one of the reasons the Warrior Academy started, right? But our first club was 15 young men who were struggling with all sorts of social challenges. It was in a city, kind of rundown gym. And I was taking over a Thai boxing club. They rocked up every single week. They just wanted to fight, right? And so, we managed to transform these young men into national champions who, they changed their behavior. There was no longer drugs and alcohol and domestic violence and all the horrible stuff and sleeping rough on the street and unhealthy relationships that just completely transformed. And so, the kind of traditional values, which I think really benefited them, are now being questioned very much. I think that it's difficult for me to give advice to a young man without sounding very contradictory to what is the kind of status quo these days. Where young men grow up with a very confused idea of what it means to be masculine, right? They're told that you are, you've got these kind of traits inside you which are toxic, and almost to the point where they need to be sterilized out of them to become clean. So, and it's like a lot of these things are just become very instinctual for these young guys, right? They have testosterone, so they behave in a certain way, and we're kind of forgetting that in a lot of ways. But for me, masculinity was and always has been, looking after the people around me. Like true masculinity was learning to look after the people around me and being a provider and protecting people. And this is the energy of masculinity for me. So when I look back and try and give my young self advice, I'd be careful what to say because I wouldn't change anything because I quite like where I am. But people often say that to me, right? If you're on the edge of that cliff again, would you jump off? And would you say anything to yourself to stop yourself doing it? And I wouldn't, because ultimately that jump probably saved my life. So I'm always a bit hesitant when it's like, what advice would you give to yourself? But I would probably say, zoom out. Don't think about the day to day so much. Try and think bigger picture. That's a very hard thing as a guy in their 20s to kind of understand anyway, let's be honest. And it sounds kind of generic. I would encourage myself to find discipline and bring discipline into my life and try and make that the forefront of my life, because it holds with it so many benefits. That's it. And I've got so many other things I would say to other young men, but if it was me speaking to me, that's what I'd probably say.
No, I love it. And I definitely have seen from when we caught up in Dubai to now, your vision for what you're doing and how you're expressing it. There's more of a playfulness, and there is this thinker bigger. You're not running every class, never work. Like it's already in. We're doing this and other ventures, and it's more of the stepping into that. It's lovely to see.
Thank you.
One of the things I find is books and movies, help me start research. I'm just curious if any classic texts or videos come to mind that you sort of watch on the good days or bad days have helped you through the moments.
Some books that have kind of had a poor stop reset for me in the past have been adventure books, right, or autobiographies. I remember once I was sort of 19 years old. I dropped out of uni. I was studying architecture, right, and I dropped out of uni, and I basically took a one-way ticket to India.
Wow.
And so I was traveling around trains in India. I picked up random work where I could, all sorts of random stuff. I ended up in Thailand doing Thai boxing a lot. Then I went to Cambodia, and I was on a bus from Cambodia to Vietnam, and I was just kind of sick of tourists. And I remember having this kind of moment of despair in my life where I was like, I don't want to go back to the UK and, have a normal life. I don't want to be here around tourists. And what I realized in my bag is that I had bought this book from a child in Phnom Penh. And there's a lot of kids around there with, they've been hit by mines and all sorts, right? So they've only got one arm or one leg, or whatever. So they're selling these books as their main source of income. So I bought a bunch of books. Anyway, one of the books was this book called Into the Wild. And so there I was on this bus, and I read it in one go. And it had such a profound impact on me, because it was basically about this like Western kid who was kind of feeling detached from the modern world and wanted just adventure, but not to be around anyone. And so as soon as I got off that bus, I remember I only had about $500, $600 left in my account, but I got a $10 note. I gave it to the nearest motorbike taxi driver in Vietnam. And I said to him, look, I'll give you another $10 if you can help me buy a motorbike here at a good price. Nice. And so literally I was on the back of this guy's bike. We visited 10 of his mates who had different bikes. And I was basically road testing all of these motorbikes without having a motorbike license, without having driven much, right? In one of the most dangerous countries in the world to drive motorbikes.
Yeah.
And I ended up buying this 150cc Honda Win hybrid. And I drove it across the whole country when I was 19. And you just wouldn't do that nowadays because everyone knows where you are. There was no real social media then. I had a Nokia 3310, which I could charge up every 3 days. Had no credits, so I wouldn't bother phoning anyone. I literally just, said to everyone, "Look, I'm going on a bit of an adventure. I'll try and get in touch with you in 2 weeks," and that was it. And it was incredible, just the sense of freedom. So that was a really great example for me, I think, of a kind of poor start reset. And the reset then was the driving across Vietnam in a bike. You just see so many things. But that was essentially a book that gave me that poor start reset. There's millions of other books that have done that as well, like 4 Hour Work Week for Business, or a great one when it comes to influencing character development in young men would be The Way of the Superior Man. I thought that was fascinating. Especially it has a very much a holistic approach to masculinity, which I think martial arts also has, right? A martial artist is very in touch with their feelings and has almost a very stoic practice in the way that it teaches you to overcome challenges and understand yourself. It's really a journey of self-discovery. And so that book was very influential there as well. Those 3 books, I would say.
I'm loving it again. Would never have guessed you did that, right? It's like,
really?
But also it explains some of your wider worldview. Most of us have gone to India. Like the first time you get to Mumbai, it's not what you think it is. It's huge and different. And your story of Mumbai isn't Mumbai. The same with so this whole different viewpoints and exploring, most don't do. Or if they do, it's such a Instagram tourist world, right? Not about Instagram. Yeah. It's a very different, down in Jumeirah and Dubai, they're there, but they're not really in Jumeirah. They're doing the experience sort of.
But even where we live in Dubai, if you look at where I live in Dubai, it's Jebel Ali, right? It's like the back garden of Dubai. It's just sand everywhere. If you look at my stories on Instagram, whenever I'm walking, it's just desert everywhere. Forget the glitz and glam of Dubai. We're really in the sticks where I am, and so I'm only 10 minutes from Marina. I can go within 8 minutes. I can be up a skyscraper, but we're kind of just on the edge of being able to dip into the city, but also being in a very quiet area, which I quite like.
I'm just curious, in your navigating of life, what helped you through those challenging times? Was it your family and drawing on that? Was it that inner fortitude and sort of your Mr. Miyagi in your head from the old days? What helped you navigate those dark nights of the soul?
I think it's a mixture, right? It's really hard to say this one thing does that. I think I've always had a very supportive family who would always drop anything if there were any issues. We very much looked after each other in many ways, and we would continue to do that. I hate the word lucky, right? Because I feel like people overuse the word lucky and they replace, the word gratitude for luck too much. Like I could say I was very lucky to find my wife, right? I've got an incredible wife who's incredibly supportive, and, we've got an amazing relationship, but I don't think that's necessarily lucky. I think that we both worked hard on ourselves to be the sort of people who could attract the other person and vice versa. And ultimately we developed our own self-esteem. So we have certain tolerance levels and things that we're willing to tolerate in a relationship. And that found us in the right way. So I think I'm very grateful for the people that have influenced my life and provide that level of support. I think you've got to have your own back, regardless of who's around you. You've got to have your own back, because ultimately you go through, as much as you feel like you go through life with other people, you are alone. It's a bit like you train in the gym, the dojo with your friends, but you're in the ring on your own, right? You might have the instructor there, nurturing you in the dojo and supporting you, but the real tests happen when you're on your own. There's no one there to come and get you. There's no one there to come and save you. And you've got to have the character to do that. And so some of the most difficult situations of my life I've gone through alone. And I think that's given me a strength of character and a level of resilience, which has gone on to serve me and therefore help me serve other people.
When you had the base jumping accident, was there ever that I can't get through this, or damn it, I'll find a way? Was there always that sort of, I will get back to walking, I'll find a way? Or
do you know what? There were so many times in that where it kind of changed. The whole energy kind of changed throughout. But initially there was denial, Doctors would say to me, you're not going to be able to walk again. And I'd be like, what are you on about? When am I going to jump again? It's just I'm getting fixed. It's just a matter of months. And he's like, well, you might be able to walk in 2 years. I'm like, I'm going to walk in the next 6. I'll be hobbling around in 6 months. Within 3 months, I was in a gym doing pull-ups. Do you know what I mean? And so, surgeons have to be pessimistic. That's their job, to cover their backs. I get it. But so there's that certain energy behind it, right? Initially, you go through something traumatic, there's denial. Then there's the kind of pragmatic approach to actually, I'm accepting this is going to take a while. They weren't necessarily right in that I'll never get through this, but I will it would take longer than I thought, right? And then I started walking, and I was slowly getting better in a kind of linear approach, and then it stopped. All progress stopped. For about 6 months, there was zero progress. And the hardest point for me was towards the end of those 6 months, well, halfway through those 6 months, where I was basically referred to the pain clinic. The pain clinic is like the Alamo of rehabilitation, where essentially you go there, there's some doctors, there's physios. Their sole job is to teach you how to live with pain for the rest of your life. Wow. Most people in this pain clinic are, they're in their 50s or 60s or 70s. They've already had a good life, right? I was 24. And I was a former professional fighter, extreme sports athlete. I was so physically active, mentally physically active all the time. To then be told that I'll never wake up in the morning without feeling pain, and the pain was like I couldn't walk more than 5 minutes without having to sit down and take painkillers and raise my feet up. And this is, 18 months after the accident, and I'm told this is how it's going to be now the rest of my life. And so that was the hardest point for me, I think, one of the darkest, lowest points for me, because it really makes you kind of question your own sanity in a lot of ways, and I think what got me through that, I suppose, was I just continued. But alongside all that was losing all the friends at the same time. But it was quite amazing how much I think the body holds on to trauma.
Yeah.
And so from that accident, after the pain clinic, I did jump again, believe it or not, right? So I did a couple more base jumps. Then I had kids and I grew the business, but I was in pain every day, all the time. And the pain was, arthritic pain all the time, lots of painkillers. I would say for the first 6 years of that, since that accident, I had a lot of painkillers. It was ice all the time. I developed gout, so I had gout attacks regularly. It was tendinitis. It was everything you could imagine, right? And so what I did is I limited the amount I moved my body because I didn't want to experience more pain. And so this whole journey has taught me so much. It's funny because I got to that point where I limited the amount of movement I had so I was doing less steps. There wasn't as much pain. But then, of course, you might put on more weight and then your pain increases because there's more pressure and suddenly you're in a downward spiral. Yeah. And I remember then taking, I was like, right, I've got to make a change here. And, I realized that I was holding on to so much baggage from that same period. So I actually went to see a therapist. And I was like, right, I need to. I've got a lot of friends who got PTSD from the military, right? And so one of them was saying to me, from that whole situation that you've been through and the rehab and everything, it's worth just having someone to talk it through. And of course, I talk to my wife all the time about it. But I think one of the challenges I had was people would bring up the conversation of base jumping and the accident I went through, and it would be almost like small talk, right? And so whenever I spoke to people about it, I didn't feel like I was doing the people who I had lost or myself justice. And so for the next few days, I'd be in like a depressive mood for three days straight, easily just what most people would call depressed. I wouldn't, I just call it a depressive mood. And I was like, I've got to find out what's triggering that. And it was, the more I spoke to this lady about it, the more it kind of came to light that I was basically holding on to this guilt that I was taking more risks than most of my friends who had lost their lives. They were so careful. A lot of the friends who had died, they were so careful in everything they did. And I was going in there like a bull in a china shop, taking massive risks. And, they were the ones that lost their lives. And so, I think I went through this process of her where, it was like, I don't know how long you want me to go into this, but it was like inception meditation, right? So I don't know, have you ever done hypnotherapy?
I'm trained in it, done it. Yeah, 20 years of it. Yeah.
Right. You're probably really enjoying this then.
No, but I am, because being too blunt, I've been through 3 years of agony pain, like literally couldn't walk for 3 months. You don't go on Facebook going, and to the point of, if this is going to continue, I can't continue. Like and it's not who we are, but it isn't sort of like, you've hurt your finger. No, we're talking that bit that just takes you out and you cannot do what you used to do. It's not the, I can override it brain. No, it's really useful, really useful.
And I mean, the things she did with me were incredible. So I'd lie on the sofa, we'd meditate for like an hour, and then she would have me visualize seeing myself on the sofa, watching myself meditate, and then going through like 3 layers deep. And it was just this completely relaxed state, probably the most relaxed my body had ever been. Yeah. And then we went through this process of me having conversations with every single person I had lost during that period. And the conversations were, some of them surprised me. It was almost like I was actually speaking to these people. It was really bizarre. And it was really profound. And ultimately letting go of a lot of baggage, right? And so then after that, I started to notice the conversations I'd have when people would bring up the things I had been through as small talk. They didn't have such a big effect on me. And then for the first time, I found myself really plowing into things like the personal training, and the personal trainer encouraged me to do more steps. And so I went from doing 2,000 to 3,000 steps a day, and then being at home with ice and painkillers for about 6 years. And that, I can't teach martial arts anymore. I can't do any of that. To walking 30 to 40,000 steps every day within a 6-month period, getting down to like 10% body fat and being in the best shape of my life, better shape than when I was in my 20s. And it was just like I had completely reversed the trauma to my body, because so much of it was tied up in my head. Yeah. It was just like a complete, full stop reset.
I love that you had how you're sharing it, and you had the experience. What I found in my 40 years of looking into this stuff is the East out in Asia understands it. The old schools like Kauai understands it really well. And then about being the story is stuck in your bones. And the problem is that having the chit chat, it doesn't actually get it out because we hold back from expressing. And actually it can be a lot to really have those conversations. Brandon Beige of The Journey did a lot of work on it. And often, whether it's the business banking, when you're at the stage now, you'll know very successful entrepreneurs, and hopefully none of them will take themselves out. But many that get their 7-8 figure exits will then actually have this massive mood swing because the driver was never aligned, mattering, coherent. It was fix the fact that at age 5, some teacher said they were an idiot or something. It's sort of the whole thing.
Yeah. And now they feel like they've hit that. This is also one of the reasons why I'm always saying to people, have a bigger vision than play an infinite game that there isn't an end point to it. And if you look at marriage or health or it's like there is no end game, right? It just continues and continues. And I think if you fall in love with an infinite game like that, you're in this position where you're almost in this constant state of play and enjoying to build and create, and you can give yourself to something without feeling like you need to complete it and that's the end. I think a lot of people who do get to that point, like you said, with an exit, they so typically slip off the edge of the cliff and end up in a, just annoyed and lost in other ways, right? There's that story of a guy who sold his business for like, 500 million or something, works really hard all his life, sells his business, gets the call, the deal's done, puts the phone down. He's reached like the top of life for him. That was his main goal, right? All his life leading towards this one moment. So he's there alone in his apartment, walks to the fridge, grabs a beer, sits down, orders a pizza, and he's just sitting there with a pizza and a beer, completely lost. It's like, what now? Because he's completed everything. And, for me, it's just about having a bigger perspective on life and not, while it's so important and, people look at unicorn success, right? And they think they admire that and they want that. But ultimately, people, they don't realize that to be the sort of person who achieves that, you've typically got to have some demons that you're fighting. It's rarely just like you've got a really good daily habit routine and you're really balanced mentally. You're not. You're probably
day on an idea. Go to the beach.
Your daily habit routine is probably unhealthy long term, and you're definitely probably not a balanced individual. Do you know what I mean? You're fighting demons, and you need to fight the demons to get to the top of the mountain in order to be at the top of the mountain. So for a lot of people, they idolize success. I think we do in the West, a lot, because we feel like when we get there, we'll be happy. And so I think that's one of the biggest flaws, right, of the typical entrepreneur.
Yeah, and we touched on it earlier. We're in an interesting transition phase, right? When you and I were growing up, a decent job could buy a decent house.
Yeah.
Nowadays, you could be earning six figures and you still can't buy a house in London. In fact, there are no houses in London. But you can buy a small 2-bed flat for $2 million. But the whole theme is getting very skewed. And I think that's just, I've got you in this sort of real space. One of the things that scares me, and it is a scare, is for the young men and women of tomorrow, we are in a phase where relationships are shifting. What's normal is no longer normal. The job isn't. And I think that's, you probably see it, the amount of depression and suicide rates in young men and from 15 to 35 is increasing. The health issues are going up massively. And just any thoughts on, for the younger men, unless below 60, as you said, old model of masculine was this, but actually even being provider, if you, in the modern world, you go, I'll be your provider protector, that is not necessarily wanted these days as the model, right? So it's an interesting, just thoughts you have on that subject while we're
young men have lost their social contract. What does it mean? What does it mean to be a man? I think that for a lot of young men, age 25 and under, especially if they don't have kids, there's a lot of male role models out there. People say there aren't any male role models. There are.
Oh, there's always
and these male role models, they are providing young men with ambition and drive and encouraging them to raise their value. But that's just one part of it, right? Yeah. The way in which they're telling them to raise their value is essentially to chase things that improve their status. So a young man would look at this like, to be a successful man, I need a Lambo, I need a watch, I need to look like I'm successful, even if I'm not. I need to be with loads of women, all these different things, right? And so the problem there is I was brought up to believe that true masculinity is about service to others. Ultimately, as a man, I feel like, and people would look at this and say, well, women can do the same thing. I'm like, well, all I can talk about is my point of view as a guy growing up and what I was shown as kind of the route to go down to become masculine, right? And that is service to others, to provide for the people around you, to provide for your community, to provide for your family, to look after and protect. Yeah. And those were the kind of the traits of masculinity. And so I look at, a taxi driver in Dubai who works 18 hours a day and sends all of his money back to his family and is a hero when he visits his village back home because he's providing for everyone. I see that as more of a man than the crypto 25-year-old who's got a Lambo and a fancy watch, right? For me, it's like true masculinity is service to others. And it's ultimately being willing to suffer in the pursuit of service for others, rather than literally just chasing things that increase your status.
In the short term. And I'm nodding away. This is why I was glad I got you on the show today, because the way you talk about it is such a clear, powerful voice, and it is what's missing. And I'm excited about it because I'm sort of an older guard, right? That sort of, like, I didn't grow up in the world today. My friends got some kids. One's 12, just gone to new school today. The world they're living into is so different. And I know that. And it's not even that I think I have a point of view that's valid. It's like, the world that I lived in does not exist anymore, even though I'm stuff, right? I don't know how it was for you. It was 20 years minimum to be a Tai Chi master. And only now at 45, I go, I get what that first lesson was about. Because when you're 15, 16, you can do stuff that you can't. And I'm not, 80 and living in a mountain or anything else.
It's a tricky conversation. And I think there's a whole, it's one of the biggest conversations we're facing right now, right? Gender, there's a lot of gender ideology around, and it's so polarizing. And what I'm seeing is it's so adversarial as well. It's almost like men versus women and women versus men. And that seems to be the energy out there. And I think we all need to pause, stop, reset, and just look at this and be like, what do we actually want to achieve here? A cohesive environment where both men and women can grow into what they feel they want to do in their lives without feeling necessarily like that route's already been painted for them. Yeah. But we also need to have a generalization of what it means to be masculine, right? So a young boy who's feeling testosterone for the first time knows where to put it, right? Knows where to place it. And we need to come to the realization that actually men and women live very different lives. If you had 100 cases of bullying with men, with young boys, versus 100 cases of bullying with young girls, you'll see that the bullying for young men is very more physical, right? And so the lives that young men face is more physical. They're more physically challenged. And then you look at things like, well, 93% of young men who go through physical bullying have fantasies of violence as they grow up. And it's much easier to help nurture and fix young men than it is to try and fix adult males who have fantasies of violence, right? And so we've got to get in there early, and we've got to create this productive, positive path that's holistic in its nature to help young men channel and understand that testosterone and where to put it. You know, we can't just deny it and call it toxic. Everything they do, we've got to channel it in the right way. So it's a really polarizing topic right now. And I was on a podcast the other day called Fit for Fathers or something, and it was a great podcast where we just basically discussed male advice, right? And we were talking about what it was like being a dad and advice for dads, this sort of stuff. And afterwards, I listed all the kind of points that we talked about. And I was really surprised by the comments, because they were mostly from women. And the comments were saying things like, you know, all of these things apply to women, or, you know, these aren't just about men. Women have been doing this. And I was like, if this was a mum's podcast and a guy said that, they would be shot down straight away. Now, on one hand, we agree as a society that it's important for men to talk about their feelings and the challenges and the problems they're facing and what they're going through. We believe as a society that it's probably a cause or a catalyst for, you know, worse mental health in men, or, you know, depression, or even such high suicide rates compared to women. Yeah. But then do we really allow men to speak about their feelings and their thoughts and their challenges and their problems? If the first thing I've seen the first time I've had a fatherhood podcast out there is that I've got a bunch of women saying to me, this is not unique to men, and really kind of shooting down anything masculine. So I think we need to be very aware of that, you know, and try and remove ourselves from this polarizing argument and, you know, men against women, and just look at it like there are young people here that it's really important we nurture and develop and empower. So it's a hot topic, right?
No, we are all human, and we're something to voice it. And I think the biggest thing is get out there and communicate. And offline, somebody I know who's an ex-Marine commando, he actually was at that point of not okay, let's put it that way. So it was because he's been the guy that's lost friends. He has to be the strong character, but you never actually then sort of take the mask off and go, that's what I'm going through. I'm sure people listening and want to learn more about you, the Warrior Academy. I know you've got the new charity as well and things you're doing there. What's the best way for them to connect with you? SebastianBates.com, is that the best way?
Yeah, you go to SebastianBates.com. A lot of what I'm doing right now is around the Warrior Academy podcast. So if you just type into YouTube, the Warrior Academy podcast, or you go into Spotify, the Warrior Academy podcast, or iTunes, whatever it is, then you'll really get an idea of what it is we're up to in the world. And you'll understand more about the charity work we're doing in developing countries around the world, and the character of an organization. That's probably the best thing I would do to find out more.
And for any like final takeaway thought, like if they know nothing else from today, Seb said, what's sort of the last Sebism we want to leave them with?
We've talked a lot about character development, about masculinity, about the challenges that people are facing, all this sort of stuff. We talked about discipline. I would say that one of the things I'm really grateful for that I did, which I think I did right, is I focused on experiences in my life. All of my energy and resources, especially in my younger years, went to developing experiences, right? And so when you spoke to me by the age of 25, I had already racked up more experiences than most 50-year-olds. I had really pushed myself outside of my comfort zone throughout my 20s. By the time I was 35 or 33, you know, even more so. And so I think that gives you such a unique perspective on your own life and the world, and what it is you're able to do, and how you're able to help people, and how you're able to contribute more than doing anything else. And so one of the things we've said is that people are chasing status. And I think the mistake people make is they are chasing status over experience. And, you know, if you're sitting down next to if you're a young man, you're sitting down next to women having a conversation, you know, that ultimately it's about your frame and how you hold yourself. And I think if you are a young man that wants to improve your chances of, you know, finding a great wife, building a great business, when you invest in your own experiences, you develop your character. When you invest in status symbols, it has zero impact on your character. And it becomes, you know, wafer thin. People can see through it the second you're tested. And so I would pursue things in my life that make me uncomfortable, that ultimately bring suffering into your life, rather than pursuing things that just make you happy. So I would say search for type 2 fun over type 1 fun. To summarize that, right? Type 1 fun is like a nice meal. You enjoy it in the moment. Type 2 fun, you probably didn't enjoy it at the moment, but over the next week, you start to really enjoy it and you're glad you did it.
Deb, as ever, it's a pleasure. We have to wrap up for today, but thank you for being part of Pause Stop Reset. If you've enjoyed the show, learning about Seb, go check him out, sebastianbates.com. For more, find us at Pause Stop Reset on Apple, Spotify, and podcasts, and we'll see you next time. Seb, absolute pleasure. As always, keep being the warrior that you are. Bye for now.
Thank you so much. Great to be here.
Once again, I'm Simon Hedley. Thank you for listening to this episode of Pause Stop Reset, which is brought to you by the team at simonx.com and published by thesimpleidea.com. So you get maximum value and to access all the bonuses and gifts, make sure to head to pausestopreset.com, register and explore the portal. And if you're looking for great people, check out onesmartnetwork.com. If you've enjoyed the show, do give us a positive review, subscribe, and share this episode with friends. I can't wait to share our next episode with you. Till then, remember you can always choose to pause, stop, reset.